Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in today. We wanted to take a look at that YouTube transcript you sent over. My joy is full. First service, 26th January 2025.
From Pastor Jerry Eze.
Oh, right. Yeah, Pastor Jerry Eze.
We were really struck by, it's not just a typical sermon, it's got this really energetic, positive vibe.
Yeah, and there's a lot there about like taking charge, being proactive, not just hoping for joy, but like grabbing it.
Absolutely. And even just reading the transcript, you can feel how lively and interactive the whole service was.
Yeah, like people shouting, hallelujah, running to the altar.
Yeah. Or to the screens, it mentions that too.
Right, right. So for this deep dive, we're going to unpack some of the big ideas. Look at the pronouncements, that passage from 1 Samuel 16, those metaphors like filling your horn with oil.
Definitely. There's a lot to explore there.
Yeah, and there are these threads running through it, this idea of a new name, like shedding the old you, and then that strong rejection of negativity.
You are liars, he says. It's powerful stuff.
It is. It's like he's drawing a line in the sand, and then there's this whole concept of joy, not as something that just happens to you.
Right. But something you claim, you embody.
Exactly. So let's start with that, this whole power of declaration and what it really means to have full joy.
Okay. So throughout the service, Pastor Eze keeps repeating these strong statements,
Yeah.
like today I announce the Lord has completed everything about my life.
Yeah, and I am in my answers.
And of course, my joy is full, which is the title itself, right?
Right, right. So it makes it, why all this emphasis on saying these things out loud? What's the point of that?
It's interesting, isn't it? Like it's not enough to just think it. You have to actually speak it.
Yeah, and it's not just a one-time thing either. Like he tells people to keep saying, my joy is full, over and over.
Up to 21 times, he mentions.
Wow, so there's this real intentionality behind it, this act of claiming that state.
And what's so fascinating is how he connects that declaration, my joy is full, with all these other positive things.
Oh yeah, like a whole list.
Yeah. Pleasant surroundings, a good inheritance, answered prayers, protection, good things being said about you, divine support, faithfulness, even overcoming past struggles.
It's like saying my joy is full is this key that unlocks all these other blessings.
Exactly. It's a powerful idea. Have you ever noticed that when you say a goal out loud, it suddenly feels more real?
Oh yeah, totally. It's like you're making a commitment.
And then there's that analogy he uses about the last day of Jericho.
Oh yeah, where they had to circle the city 7 times.
Right, and that intensified action led to the breakthrough. It's like the repeated declaration is this act of faith that can shift things.
So it's not just about saying it once and hoping for the best.
No, it's about persistence,
Yeah.
Like maybe there are areas in your life where you need to be more vocal, more persistent in your declarations.
Okay, that's a good point. And it leads us to this other theme that's almost the opposite, but also connected. That forceful rejection of negativity.
Yeah, the language gets really strong here, like you are liars.
It's intense, right? It's not just about ignoring negativity, it's about confronting it head on.
And that's where the idea of a new name comes in,
Yeah.
like shedding old labels, limitations, whether they're internal doubts or external expectations.
Yeah, like those examples he gives, cancer, afflicted, unmarried, disappointed, all these things people carry with them.
It's heavy stuff, and he's saying you can break free from that, step into a new identity that isn't defined by those past burdens.
And that line, you will not find the same be again. That's powerful. Like he's drawing a line and saying the past is over, your best days are here.
It's a huge declaration of hope and change. And to illustrate this, he brings in the story from 1 Samuel 16 about God rejecting Saul as king and choosing David instead.
Interesting choice. Why that story?
Well, think about it. Saul represents the old way, the way that wasn't working anymore.
Okay, so God moving away from Saul is like him rejecting those unwanted circumstances, just like we're being encouraged to reject negativity in our own lives.
Precisely. It's about taking control, recognizing when a chapter needs to end, and actively declaring the start of a new, better one.
Which brings us to this other key idea, moving by the Spirit, not being led by our emotions.
Ah, yes. And this is where that metaphor of filling thy horn with oil comes in as the opposite of mourning.
That's a vivid image. Can you unpack that a bit? What does it mean to fill your horn with oil?
It's about recognizing the difference between emotions, which can be fleeting and often tied to our circumstances, and moving by the Spirit, which is presented as a stronger, more enduring source of guidance.
So instead of dwelling in negativity, in mourning, We're being encouraged to tap into this spiritual power, this oil, to move forward with purpose and faith.
Right, and he emphasizes not relying on our own calculations, on what we can see on the surface, but on what the Spirit is saying, which implies a deeper level of knowing.
Have you ever noticed how sometimes when you're stuck in your feelings, you can't see a way forward?
Absolutely, it's like being in a fog. And he's saying the Spirit can cut through that, guide you to a clearer path.
And then there's that interesting phrase about the changing language of a man of the Spirit. Like, when you operate from that spiritual place, your whole way of being shifts.
It's a fascinating idea, like even the way you speak, the words you use, change when you're aligned with the Spirit.
And the connection of oil of joy to beauty for ashes, that's such a powerful image of transformation.
It is. It suggests that even out of difficult, painful experiences, something beautiful and joyful can emerge through this spiritual empowerment.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about God's perspective and this idea of divine favor being available to us.
All right, so the transcript mentions God being seated in heaven and even laughing at the vain imaginations of people, which sounds a bit intense, right?
It does, but then he goes on to say, you are also seated with Christ in the heavenly places.
So it's about aligning your perspective with that higher divine viewpoint.
So even when things are chaotic down here, we can tap into this sense of being above it all, seeing the bigger picture.
Exactly. And then there's that striking image of God preparing a table right in front of your enemies.
What's the message there, do you think?
It's about provision, about blessing, even in the midst of challenges. It's not that the enemies disappear, but that you're being supported and sustained right in their presence.
And that ties into the idea of high favor being spoken over you. It's like a declaration of divine blessing and protection.
It is. It's a powerful affirmation. And speaking of powerful figures, let's move on to the story of Jesse and David from 1 Samuel 16.
Yeah, it's interesting that when Samuel is sent to anoint the new king, Jesse the father is mentioned first.
Right. And the transcript points out that Jesse's name means father, and that his spiritual standing seems to have had a huge influence on his family.
Like it paved the way for one of his sons to become king.
Exactly. And that introduces this really interesting concept of gatekeepers.
Can you explain that a bit more? What does it mean to be a gatekeeper in this context?
Well, the idea is that some people, through their own deep spiritual connection, can impact the destinies of their families and future generations.
So they're like spiritual guardians, opening doors for those connected to them.
Yes, and the story of David tending sheep and encountering lions and bears is brought in as an example of this.
Oh, right. So how does that fit in?
Well, it's presented as evidence of how Jesse's guidance, the environment he created, prepared David for greater challenges.
Like those smaller, dangerous encounters built up his courage and resilience, preparing him to be king.
Exactly. So it makes you think maybe we're all gatekeepers in some way, influencing those around us, and that our own spiritual growth has a ripple effect.
That's a pretty powerful thought. And then the story shifts to Samuel almost choosing Eliab, David's brother, based on his appearance.
But God stops him, right? Saying, look not on his countenance, because it's a new season. For the Lord seeth not as man seeth. For man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart.
What a powerful statement. So it's this idea that in this new season, appearances don't matter as much.
It's about inner qualities, that deeper connection that God sees, but humans might miss.
Okay, and that leads us to the last big theme, rejecting what if, thinking, and embracing faith.
So Samuel's afraid. When God tells him to anoint David, he's worried about what Saul will do.
It's so relatable, right? Even with divine guidance, those anxieties and doubts can creep in.
But what's important is what happens next. Samuel's fears never actually come true.
So it's a reminder that those what-if scenarios we create in our minds often don't materialize.
And then he brings in the example of the 4 Hebrew boys facing the fiery furnace with unwavering faith.
That's powerful. Even if God didn't save them, they wouldn't compromise their beliefs.
It's about choosing faith over fear, no matter the potential consequences.
So it's not just about ignoring negative possibilities. It's about actively declaring it will not happen.
Exactly. It's about taking a stand with your faith and not giving power to those fears.
Towards the end of the transcript, there's the call to action about offerings and tithes.
Right, but for our deep dive today, we've really focused on these core principles around cultivating joy and living by faith.
So to sum up, we've looked at the power of speaking declarations, rejecting negativity, embracing a new identity, and navigating life by the Spirit, not just our emotions.
We've also explored aligning our perspective with God's, trusting in divine favor, recognizing our potential as gatekeepers and choosing faith over fear.
And it all comes back to that central declaration, my joy is full. Not just a passive statement, but an active way of living.
So for you, listening, think about how you can apply this joyful anticipation to your own challenges and aspirations.
How can you move beyond those immediate emotional reactions and tap into that spirit-led perspective?
What might filling your horn with oil look like in your own life as you navigate what's ahead?
Some great food for thought. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.